Welcome to this midweek message. I'm Drew Goins. Today with me, Nick Poole. We are continuing our Bible People A to Z. We've come and landed on the letter R. Several honorable mentions here. I think Rachel, Rebecca, Ruth are some honorable mentions. Not a whole lot of male honorable mentions that I could find. There probably are some, but none that are like...
Would Rehoboam be one?
Sure.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I like it. But we are on... Rahab.
Sorry, did I mess up your dramatic intro to
No, that was perfect. So that was just the right amount of...
Did I just sneak it in there?
Dramatic emphasis. So I liked it. Rahab. The story can be found, I say the story, in Joshua that we're going to do. But there's some more references which we'll talk about here shortly. Do you know what does Rahab mean?
It's funny. We were talking about this before we started the podcast. I got one definition of Rahab, and then you ended up getting another one. The definition that I got was wide.
Okay.
And it's talking about the thickness of the wall of Jericho and stuff like that. So her name is a direct tie-in from where she's from.
Okay. Huh. Mine I found was pride or arrogance. I don't know if I just misspelled it in my name thing, which is possible, or if it's just some alternate name meanings, So tell us the story about Rahab.
So the story begins with, you've got Joshua who's taken over from Moses. He's leading the Israelites back into Canaan to conquer it. They come across Jericho, and now, after them moving through Canaan, then moving through the desert, their story is starting to become very well known in Canaan. Of course, it's been a very long time for these stories to kind of permeate, which is key in kind of what happens to Rahab. So they send spies into Jericho. They immediately go into Rahab's house. Rahab's a prostitute.
A harlot, prostitute.
And apparently there is some kind of a message going back between her and the king of Jericho, which is very interesting. And what's kind of neat about that, too, is that interaction there. There's some people who think, well, Rahab was also a spy and she worked directly for the king. The others say, in other readings that I did, said that Rahab had this indebtedness to the king, that she was working for him, but not necessarily in a spy.
Okay.
Though, she owed him money.
Gotcha.
Or that her family owed the king money. So anyway,
so these spies come.
The spies come. They go in her house.
She hides them.
She hides them, which is really interesting. And the king says, you need to bring them out. Tell us where they are. And she doesn't. She lies.
She bold-faced lies. I don't know where they've gone. I've seen them, but I have no idea where they've gone. Meanwhile, she's hidden them upstairs under some...
What was it?
Flaxseed or something? Not flaxseed is not the right word, but when I read it, it was something to that effect.
Yeah, it was the flax stalks.
Stalks, yes. So they're hidden under that.
So here's an interesting thing that I found. Do you know the significance of why they mentioned that? Of why it wasn't just...
I don't.
Yeah, so it's really interesting is that if you go into biblical history and you start looking at when the flax was dried out, it was during Passover. It was during the time of Passover.
Okay.
So while this is happening...
It's Passover time.
It's Passover.
Okay.
Which is really cool when we get further down into this. So she goes up to them at night and she strikes this deal. Save me, my family, and my household. Spare us from what's coming. And the spies go, well, why? Why did you help us? And she goes, I've heard the stories of what God has done for your people. And I've seen what's happened. We heard about the Red Sea drying up and you walking across dry land. We've heard you conquering these two Amorite kings. She goes, our hearts are melted. Our courage failed. Which
that's pretty good.
When you hear those two things, that our hearts have melted and our courage failed, it puts a whole new perspective on what goes on around the Jericho walls in chapter 6 whenever they go in for the attack. Because so many times when we have this story portrayed for kids, and being the kids pastor, I see a lot of these sometimes. You have And there is some mockery. There's some mockery that you see from the soldiers up on the walls as the Israelites are marching around doing what God told them to do. And then they're always like very brash. They're very bold and everything else. But what we are seeing here is an urgency and a fear of what God is going to be doing here because of these stories that they're hearing. And if you're getting this common theme, this is important. And so they make the deal and said, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to hang a scarlet cord out of a window, and that is going to be a signal to us that that's where you are.
Makes even more sense that it's Passover time. Like it's even more of a cool little blend in there. So she puts it up, and then keep going.
She puts it up and then gets them out of the city and gives them specific instructions on how not to be caught, which is very interesting in the sense of she knows like what the guards are going to be doing and where they're going to be looking. So she tells them, go into the hills, wait 3 days, then go here, do this, and you're going to be fine. And they said, as long as we get back to our people and be able to give a good report, we'll do this. And they do that, and it works out for them. And the soldiers do not find them. They don't know what happened between Rahab and the spies. And then we get into chapter 6 whenever the assault begins on Jericho.
And it's destroyed.
But
she's spared. Her and her family are spared.
But here's the thing that I really love about this, and I never fully understood it or really looked at it in any real detail. Because I wasn't looking at Rahab, I was looking at the Israelites. So now that I'm looking at Rahab, it's kind of neat. So we go into chapter 6, and I want to read this because it's really, really neat. So chapter 6, verse 15. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. Except on that day, they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priests sounded the blast, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city and all that are in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared because she hid the spies we sent. I mean, this is Joshua giving his, this is Sparta speech, let's do this.
Sparta speech. I like it, yeah.
I mean, this is what he was doing.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this, he is honoring her commitment.
It is. It's also humorous to me that she's still referred to as the prostitute or the harlot here. And it's there's an old question of how many one bad deed is enough to condemn a man, basically, but how many good deeds are needed to redeem him? Well, the answer is none. I mean, Jesus is the only redemption in that sense. But it's can we not say Rahab, the one that hid the spies? No, it's Rahab the prostitute, and don't be confused about it. So.
But you know what's fascinating about this? Do you know what she goes on to be known for after this moment? She goes from being Rahab the prostitute to something different. Do you know what that different thing was?
I don't know that I do.
It's interesting because she goes on.
This may be my life application piece, but keep going.
She goes on and lives with the Israelites after this. And it goes further into it, I think in verse 25, and says that she stays with them and lives among the Israelites to this day.
Okay.
But what's really cool about this is that they've traced her lineage, and she is
Jesus.
She's a direct ancestor to David and Jesus.
Yeah.
So ultimately, yes, she is known as being the prostitute. She's known as the person being the spies. But out of the belief in the stories that she hears of her heart being melted, her courage having failed, she ends up being an ancestor to Jesus Christ.
Which is kind of, again, if it's kind of cool in the sense of if you look at Jesus's lineage is people that have messed up. I mean, it's whether that's David or Rahab, which is pretty cool. My life application is a little bit in that too. I don't want us to miss the point that Rahab was a prostitute, a harlot. She was able, I think part of it, she was able to hide these men for a little bit because men came and went from her house. It wasn't not unusual for her to do that. I also can't deny the fact that she bold-faced lied to people. I mean, she just lied to them. So is there anything good to say about her faith? And my take there is absolutely. But don't take my word for it. Do you know where Rahab shows up? She shows up in Hebrews. The faith like Rahab. She shows up in James. It wasn't for Rahab's faith, but her works. I mean, Rahab makes references in 6 other books outside of her story, and when they're talking about crediting her faith. And again, when we say her trade was that of a prostitute, and then one of her biggest acts was just a lie, like a sin. It's just, I don't know, which is encouraging for us. And I say that in the sense of the grace that she experienced is the same grace that we get to experience in that. So that's kind of my application piece.
But going into that same idea, she risked everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you're right. We can focus in on the lying, but we have to understand that not only did she lie, not only did she hide these spies, not only did she get them out of there, that in the middle of this speech that Joshua is giving in chapter 6, he is naming her as the reason why they're doing that.
Yeah.
And
that exemption for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've got to remember, like, whenever they would make these speeches, they were making it loud to thousands of other people. There's no doubt people in Jericho heard this. So there's no telling what turmoil is happening on the other side of the wall before it fell, of people trying to get to Rahab because they know that this is her fault. She risked her entire family's life doing this. So, yeah, there's a tremendous amount of faith. You're 100% right. See, I went with it. My life application piece that I went through, and goes back to the theme that I mentioned, are these stories. A lot of times that we believe that our words and our actions and things have very little merit, have very little impact on the people around us. But the fact of the matter is, it's those stories that changed Rahab from being Rahab the prostitute to being Rahab the ancestor of Jesus Christ.
That's a good point.
And I think for all of us listening, it's important for us to remember our stories mean something. Our actions mean something. Our stories and our actions that we tell people and that we live into have a way of impacting them that we will never understand. And we have to keep that in mind as believers and followers of Christ, that when we are out there, when we are with people that do not agree with us, when people who are shouting in our face, that when we act accordingly and we act out of the love of Jesus Christ and out of that mercy and grace, that the story that they walk away with is one that is powerful beyond reason.
Beyond what we even know.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's good. I like Rahab.
Yeah, Rahab's really cool.
It's a good one to do that. And I don't know that I realized as much as she popped up in, whether that's James or Job or Hebrews, like all these places that her faith is credited to her. So awesome. Well, thanks for doing this today. It's been fun. So I hope you've enjoyed it out there listening. Stay connected and stay encouraged.